I always used to play with my cousin George, and we always used to discuss our family, yeah. Which, everything I told him, he took to his mother, and his mother would be mad. When I told him the story about Grandma Barbara being a tightrope walker and a dancer, and that came with the troupe here. He wouldn't have told his mother. The next day, she come running up the street to my mother, Aunt Mary, and she said to my mother, "What is the idea of telling your daughter the story about our family?" She says, "Aren't you ashamed of our family? Why should you tell them?" She said, "These are things you shouldn't discuss. These are things that should go to the grave with us. Right. You shouldn't tell the children this, because it's a disgrace what our mother did." And my mother said, "I want my children to know our heritage. I want my children to know all about me and all about us." She said, "I'm not proud of it." She says, "But it's a story, and I think they have a right to know."
Where did our heritage begin? Where did our heritage begin? Where did our heritage begin? Did our heritage begin?
Well,
the Jesse.
Jesse, right. They began in it began in St. Michael's, the Azores. Many years ago, there was a shipwreck in front of the Azores, and the men in those days, when the ship went down, that was it. You know, nobody went out looking. We didn't have Coast Guard. We didn't have anything.
Right.
So what the men did was they swam ashore, or went to shore, and went to the island, the Azore Island, and married the women there because they were there so long.
Right.
And so some were German and English crew, and the others were slaves, African slaves from Africa or whatever. They were slaves. They were the boat.
So we're talking early 1800s here.
So we're talking really.
We could probably find that out too.
Yeah. But that's amazing that they didn't send everybody to look for the boat if they were slaves on their boat. Those slaves must have been destined to go to America or wherever to be work on somebody's.
Yeah, that could be.
Well, no, they would sell them when they come over.
Yeah,
They just went over, stole the men, and then they put them up on a block and they, auctioned them off.
Right.
Somebody had to.
This comes on. I hope it's all coming.
It's like all right. So we don't know.
So we don't know who married who way back there. So our people came from.
So everybody in the family says we're German and English, but where does Evelyn's black foot come from?
So everybody says we're German and English, but how do you know?
Exactly.
Way back there it wasn't the slaves.
Well, we could have been the slaves, though. Because I got an extra.
All right.
In my
Okay.
You have to tell that story.
Tell the story. You went to the doctor.
Well, I stepped on a stick. I thought it was a nail, and I stepped on the stick because it was hurting for a couple of weeks. So I went, and he's like, well. And he x-rayed it. And he says, well, he goes, it was a stick because it doesn't show up on the x-ray. He goes, I did see an extra bone in your foot. And he goes, it's really nothing to worry about. He goes, but mostly you only see it in black people. He goes, your whites have like 26 bones in your foot, and blacks have the 27. And so in my left foot, I have 27 bones. So our descendants, the ancestors could have been the slaves. Thanks.
Right.
Not the German.
I know that, or the English. That's true. Your grandfather first, your mother's father. Yeah.
Your father.
No. Okay.
Your grandfather.
Your grandfather. Yeah, on my mother's side.
Okay. Your mother's side.
Yeah. He was in Portugal, and he worked for these rich people taking care of their garden, and then he would go to have a school, be a janitor of a school. Very nice. So anyway, there's this troupe, dancing troupe and circus troupe that would come to different countries. They were from the United States, but they would go to different countries and play. So they played in Portugal, the Azores, the town. So the tightrope walker and dancer, she met my grandfather, our grandfather, and they fell in love. So the troupe went off, and she stayed and married him.
Okay.
And she had 3 children. She had my mother, she had Aunt Emily, and she had Aunt Mary. Okay? So she stayed there. But she was very unhappy because in the troupe, there was a man that she really liked. But I don't know, for some reason or other, Grandpa fascinated her or whatever.
Right.
So when the troupe came back a few years later, she picked up with him.
Oh,
and she left. And left the kids with him.
Now, how old were they?
Well, okay. My mother was 12 or 13. I don't know, that way. So what my grandfather did was he worked for these rich people, I told you. Well, he made my mother be the cook with the baker cook. That's why my mother was such a good baker, because she helped the pastry thing. She made my Aunt Emily clean the house, the rich lady. And then Aunt Mary was so young that she played with her daughter. She had a daughter. She was a daughter's companion. So, and that's how my grandfather was on his own, like that. But he was so heartbroken and so embarrassed to think she went off and left the kids. And he didn't have the kids either. So he just committed suicide one day. How he did it was he was working in the school. Now, this is all told by my mother, and he was working in school, and they have these heavy windows, and he just put his head out and just let the window fall. Now, my mother told me this,
So who took care of the kids after that?
Well, the lady had the kids.
And then
They were a little older.
She didn't
get
rid of them? Even though she left
She kept them there, yes. She didn't know what to do.
Was she good to her?
Yes, well,
I mean,
they were working. They were working there. So that's when my father.
She wasn't mean like Cinderella.
No. And she treated the little girl very good.
Yeah.
So then that's when my grandmother sent for Aunt Mary. Sent for Aunt Emily and my mother. But with the intentions to. So it all worked out good. He was the son of Jessica Jesse, and there was Frank was the oldest brother, which is Eunice and the Jesse girl's father. Then came Babu. Then came Uncle Manuel, and then came Uncle John, who was an aircraft flyer in World War II. But they had 2 older sisters.
Sisters?
Yeah.
Okay.
One was Johnny Leakey's mother.
Whose name was?
Whose name was Amelia. And then The other one was married to Sarah Murphy's father, and she was Mary. Wasn't she Mary? I think she was Mary.
Why do they call him Johnny Leakey?
I don't know. They just named him that. It was an upper name, and I thought it was a vulgar name to me.
Oh, really?
He didn't mind it. So they were in Portugal, and then Frank was supposed to go into service for the Portuguese in the Portuguese service, Portugal service, but he didn't want to go. So what he did, one of those freighters came into port, so he went on the ship. You know, he stowed away on the ship. Yeah. So he got sergeant. He was. Yeah. So he, this is the oldest one. So he got friendly with another guy on the ship who was from Bermuda. So they tried a few times when the ship docked, they tried to jump the ship. But they were always caught and put back up. They were always taken back to the ship. So when they got in Bermuda...
The other guy was a stowaway too?
Yeah. When the police caught them, they had to put him back because they had so many workers on the ship.
So they made him up?
So they put him back for their job on the ship. The ship that they jumped, you know?
Yeah, but which they were on illegally anyways.
Yeah. No, because they were supposed to be in the ship.
Right.
Well, Uncle Frank, I don't know about the other man. So anyway, when they got to the port of Bermuda, he said, the other man said, don't worry, I have relatives in Bermuda. They're going to help us stay in Bermuda when the ship goes. So when they got to Bermuda, they jumped the ship. The ship was held up 2 days because they were looking for them. The police and all looking for them in Bermuda. They couldn't find them. So they didn't know that this man was related to anybody in Bermuda. They didn't know. Okay. So what they would do, they would hide up in the attic in one of the houses all day and night. And when they did want to go out, they would dress as women and walk the streets.
We had cross-dressers in our family.
and walk the streets of Bermuda.
Oh my God.
So this went on for a while.
What year was this, would you say?
Oh,
and the ship stayed in port all this time?
No, the ship stayed in port 2 days. They had to go on their route, and they went. But it was left that if they were found, they would be put in jail, and they would ship them back to Portugal.
Oh, okay.
Deport them back to Portugal. So anyway, that's how they went on. In the meantime, Grandma down in Portugal missed her son and all that, and he was disgraced because he had jumped, served the service and all. So she decided to go to Bermuda, knowing he was there. But somehow they had forgotten about him jumping ship and all that. I don't know what happened. But anyway, they went to Bermuda. She got all his sons, his children, and she sold whatever house property she had, and she went to Bermuda. She was Grandma and Grandpa, and it was my father, Uncle Manuel, Uncle John, and Sarah Murphy's father. Sarah Murphy's father, his wife had died already, and then they had the young Johnny Leakey's mother. So they all came.
Sarah Murphy's father was how related?
He married my father's sister. Okay. So anyway, they all came to Bermuda, and they found work as farmers, but they didn't do too well as farmers. They wanted to be fishermen, but they didn't have boats or much money or anything, but they had relatives here in Plymouth, and so they wrote to the relatives and asked the relatives if they could come to Plymouth and how the situation was. So they said, oh, come to Plymouth, we'll find you a house and all. So anyway, they came and and they came to Cherry Street. Now, I can't remember if they built the house or if they rented this house, but they had this house. As a matter of fact, one of our relatives owns the house now, isn't that going to Yeah, Charlotte Seeley's brother owns the house.
We'll have to drive by it and see.
Yeah, Charlotte Seeley, A.B.'s daughters. A.B. son. Charlie.
Chucky's got the house.
Oh, Charlotte Jesse?
Not Chucky, the young guy, the older guy, Charlie.
Okay.
So anyway, they all, so they were on Cherry Street. And Grandma always wanted her family with her, whether they were married or whatever. She wanted her family with her.
Was it a big house?
Yeah, it was a big
Did she come over with the sons too?
She's the one that brought them all over. She was the boss of the. She was before Grandpa.
Where was Grandpa?
He was there, but she was the boss of everything.
Did they come in through New York like LSI?
They did. Okay.
So that might be on record?
Yeah, I went to the library and I tried to find it. I couldn't find
There's
it.
a website that you can see if
Oh,
you can find
gee,
some.
good.
My mother-in-law knows what it is. I haven't done it yet. She tried to find her family.
Because I went to the library, I couldn't. But they did have articles about Uncle Frank living on Union Street and starting a boat building business, but not the food.
So from Bermuda, they came to New York City?
So from the Bermuda, they came to New York City, but naturally they came like to Plymouth.
Okay.
So they had that house on Cherry Street. So the house was too small. So what Grandma did was buy the property down on Castle Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Your house?
No, Uncle Manuel's house.
Oh, all right.
So she had the cellar, which she had 2 rooms, a hopper, and a sink and everything. And then she had the first floor, then she had the second floor, then she had the third floor. So she lived on the second floor.
Okay.
And my mother and father lived in the cellar because my mother and father weren't going to stay there too long.
They were already married?
Yeah.
Now, how did they meet Laveau?
Oh, okay.
Now, that's all right. Go back. Go back to how we met Laveau.
All right. When grandmother moved there, she wanted her kids all settled. So Uncle Frank went off to marry a woman in Boston.
Okay. Was it all prearranged?
I don't think so. She was living with a minister in Boston who was related to them.
Okay.
So anyway, Uncle Frank met her through contacts and relatives and all, and he married her.
Okay.
And so she came back to Plymouth to live. So Grandma says, gee, it's a small house.
Is that T. Francisca?
Yeah, T. Francisca. And then, so she wanted my father to get married. And so, because my father was a rogue, they said. Who was a rogue?
A rogue?
Certainly about the woman, yeah. In fact, in Bermuda, she was very upset because he was running around with all the girls. When we went to visit Bermuda, the lady wanted to meet us because she was Grandpa's girlfriend. So anyway, and my grandma sent a letter to Portugal and knew that she had cousins, my mother and stuff. So she wanted my father to marry Aunt Emily, because Emily was around my father's age. My mother was older. Emily was in the middle. Aunt Mary was the youngest.
Okay.
Okay? So
Christina.
Christina was
came in later?
I didn't know she was step.
I might not have been here.
Then Aunt Mary would have been our grandmother.
But we probably wouldn't be here then. We would always
Aunt Emily.
Aunt Emily, not Aunt Mary.
Yeah, Aunt Emily.
No, gee, Aunt Emily would have been your grandmother.
Tia and Bobo always fought.
Always fought. They always fought. Right. So when they came here, so poor Aunt Emily was so good. She didn't want to come alone. So she brought my mother. No, for both. For both. So when they got here, my father...
Mary stayed over?
Mary stayed over because she was too young. They couldn't come. And what's her name, didn't want any problems. The both. My, grandmother. Not my, our grandmother.
Our great
Yeah, she didn't want, because she was still too young to bring over. But she didn't mind
Bevo.
Because Bevo was older than Aunt Emily.
So okay, now see, I always thought Bevu and Uncle Manuel sent for them. And
No.
Oh, see, I had that wrong.
Yeah.
So when they came, Bevo saw Bevo, so naturally he liked her better.
Oh.
And because he always thought Aunt Emily was a fluty tootie. Yeah. She always with the hair styled. She started to streak the hair a little bit, all with the makeup, He didn't like that. But my mother, Bevo, was a wholesome, beautiful girl, nice, fat.
Okay.
They like the fat. Shapely. Yeah. So he married her.
Now, how did your grandmother, was she mad that he didn't want? Or did
No, she was happy.
She just wanted to marry.
She wanted to marry.
Yeah.
She was happy
Okay.
to have him married.
Yeah.
So then she decided, she wanted all her kids with her.
Right.
So she decided to build this house.
Yeah.
So my father and mother went downstairs in the cellar, but it was nice. It was 2 rooms. It had a sink, had a little hopper, and it was kind of nice. And because I was born down there, and but my father had bought the house where I'm living now, and he was fixing it because he gutted it all out. It had no electricity, it had no bathrooms or anything, so he did it all. He got it at an auction, and so he fixed it all up. In the meantime, he was living there.
Yeah.
And so in the meantime, my Aunt Emily sent for Aunt Mary to come over because
Now, where did Aunt Emily live during all this?
she boarded with some people.
Okay.
I don't know if it was.
In Plymouth.
It was in Plymouth, yeah.
She didn't want to go back to Bermuda after that?
She didn't want to go back
After
to
he
Portugal.
rejected her? I mean, Portugal, after he rejected her?
No, because they had it hard in Portugal. I'll have to go back and tell you about their story. But anyway, so Aunt Mary came, and when Uncle Mango saw Aunt Mary, well, he just flipped over. Because Aunt Mary was much younger than Uncle Mango. But poor thing, she didn't know, she didn't have anybody, so she married Uncle Manuel. So that's when grandmother had Uncle Frank living on the 3rd floor. She lived on the 2nd floor before my grandfather. And then my mother was down in the cellar. Who was on the 1st floor?
Who was on the 1st
Then
floor?
Uncle Manuel then.
Uncle Manuel. That's right. So Uncle Frank, so every day they worked, my father worked a little bit in the cottage, not much, but they all worked. And when they came home on Friday, they had to give grandmother all their pay.
Even though they were married?
They were married. She gave out the money, she did the shopping, she practically told them when to go to bed.
And what did the grandfather? Oh, my God.
Huh?
What did grandfather do for the
They sold fish. They went fishing, and they wheeled the wheelbarrow down the street and said, a fishmonger. And everybody used to call them the Protestant fishmongers, yeah.
Jeez, I can't get over how domineering your mother was.
Oh, my grandma.
I mean, your grandmother.
She was real.
Usually it's real Portuguese is the white follows 5 feet behind. And
yeah, Aunt Frances had 1, 2, she had about 4 kids. She was living up in the attic. She resented my grandmother for taking the money and all that. So she said to Uncle Frank, I'm not taking this anymore. I'm going, I'm moving, and either you're coming with me or I'm going by myself. I don't know what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go. Now, I'm telling you this is what I hear from my side of the family.
Right.
What my mother and father said.
Yeah.
But if you talk to the Jesse girls, they all have a different version of it.
And they were Frank's daughters?
And they were Frank's daughters, yeah.
which Jesse we talking about?
Naomi, Rose.
Frank Jesse.
Oh, so it's Naomi?
Naomi, Ruth, Lydia.
Naomi's gone?
Yeah, Naomi, Ruth.
What did they say then?
The only one.
Not such a bad story. What
Yeah,
did they say?
well, they knew that Grandma and they were having a hard time. Their mother and father was having a hard time with Grandma and Grandpa, and a few other little things. But anyway, so there was a house that was vacant on Castle Street, right across from me, the house that burned. The cross house, okay? And up in the attic was a
Tish Gloucester.
Yeah.
Tish
Gloucester.
Gloucester, an old lady.
Yeah, and the apartment was empty upstairs, so they decided to move there. Well, that didn't sit good with Grandma. No, she was mad. So she just wrote them off, ignored them.
Really?
Yeah, she was mad. So
that's her son.
That was her son.
Most people want their kids to move out.
Yeah. So anyway, she was a very proud woman, that Grandma.
Yeah.
And she had a surrey with the fringe on the top, with the horse. And she kept it down there.
Do you remember
And every Sunday, they'd go to church and they'd go for a ride. And the kids, and she sometimes would take some of the kids. I don't know, Evelyn and my sisters, but they were older. So anyway, she would not take the Jesse girls because she was mad. And she'd go right by them, so proud. And
those were her grandchildren.
Those were her grandchildren too. Yeah. And the poor little kids, they would climb the fence, over the fence, yelling to the grandma. She would completely ignore them. She was so mean. That's true. I mean, if the girls tell you that's the truth. You know, in the meantime, Grandma had married this man, who was a cabral, and they had a child, which was Helen Tavares's mother.
I can't keep track of all.
Our grandmother.
Our grandmother, the
Palooza.
The Palooza that ran away with the trapeze guy. Okay. She did what?
She married them, finally married the man she ran off with.
Okay.
And they went to Hollywood, California.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. And they had this one child, which was Christina Cabral, because the name was Cabral. And then the grandmother had died, and the grandfather had died first. Then the grandmother had died. So they had this 14-year-old child.
Christina.
Yeah. So they wrote to Plymouth to find out. They knew she had sisters.
Yeah.
They knew she had 3 sisters. So they wrote to Plymouth and told them that they were going to send her to the sisters here in Plymouth.
Okay.
Which is really a half-sister.
Half. So Aunt Emily stepped in and said she would accept them, and all. But they all went. So she went to live with this Aunt Emily.
Oh, so that's from Aunt Emily.
So that's how.
So was that Art's mother?
That's Dot and Helen's mother.
So she died. They died over there. The both of them died.
They both died.
But she never tried looking at the kids that she was in.
No,
that's awful. Oh, yeah. How old was everybody when he died?
I was 7. I was 16.
I was 7 and a half, something like that. And Esther's 5 years older than I am, so.
And then
Now, what did he
Evelyn was
do?
26.
What did he do?
All right, he was a boat builder. And this Charlie Rose, isn't it coincidental? The guy's name was Charlie Rose. He had this big boat, and he wanted the boat to come up on dry dock. This was May.
Didn't he want to put it in the water?
No, he was pulling it up, and that's how it blew
I
up.
thought he was putting
No,
it in.
and Babu had the shop, and he had like
It was his own
going down.
shop?
His own
Yeah,
shop.
it was down by the
But he rented the
lumberyard,
land.
yeah,
But
down by
it
the
was
lumberyard,
friends.
he rented
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now,
And-
what, was it a boat?
Boat building that he built
Okay.
boats. And he had his tools and everything.
Okay.
Very nice place. We used to go swimming there and everything. So this man, Charlie Rose, was one of my father's customers. And he had this big boat, and he wanted to bring it up because he wanted to have it. This was May. He wanted, something was wrong with the boat. So he wanted the boat to come up because he wanted to fix it because the season was going to start. This was May. So my father said he couldn't do it because it was 1939, Hitler was at war, and the metal already, they were rationing off the metal. So instead of my father having a pulley made out of metal, my father made a pulley made out of wood. And it was all right, because he had been pulling down boats and pulling up boats. It was enough. But he said he couldn't do this boat because this boat was too big and too heavy. So the man said, oh, come on, I'll help you with it. I'll be here with a bunch of other guys. He said, we can all do it. It can be done. It can be done. My father says, no, I don't think it can be done. And so the guy talked my father into it. So my father was running the motor up the top, and they were down the bottom trying to do whatever they did. So all of a sudden, the thing exploded in my father's face. The engine and all. And then that's what happened. And
Oh, see, now I always thought a boat fell.
Okay, so.
no, it exploded.
I thought it was,
He was snapped.
yeah.
And it just
And I thought he was crushed in it.
No. And there was a pimento kit that was right there, yeah.
Did anybody else get hurt too?
No, he was the only one. Because all the other guys were down the other end.
So it
So no, he went to the
I
hospital.
heard that
Wasn't he in a-
if it was today, maybe they could do something, but
Yeah.
then
Wasn't he in a coma
He
for
was in
5
a coma
days?
for a few days. I don't know how many
Yeah.
days. But he was in a coma for a few
They
days.
didn't know a lot about
No.
it.
Yeah.
was to his face.
His whole face. When I went to see him in the hospital, he was just...
And didn't he lose every
all over.
tooth in his mouth,
Oh, yeah.
too?
He was just-
Beautiful teeth.
What was
Never
the
brushed
ages
them.
of everyone? How old was he?
All right, Evelyn was about 26.
So how old was he?
He was 51.
Oh, he was, I thought he was in his 30s.
No, he was
They all
51.
told us maybe it was 1930.
And
Geez, he was
1939.
pretty old. He had you, Ma.
She was oh, yeah, she was. I think the life baby was 45. My mother was 45.
Kilo was 7.
And I was 16.
16.
So Tony was 15.
Auntie Bella
Was
was
12 and 13.
Yeah, my mother was,
Your mother was above me, and your mother was 3 years older
she was
than me.
married.
Yes. I want my children to know our heritage. I want my children to know all about me and all about us. She said, I'm not proud of it. She said, but it's a story, and I think they have a right to know.
This is a little test to see how my recording balance is. I want to see if my balance is alright, 'cause I only have one track that I'm laying down to smack, just like back in the 60s, when all they had was one single mono track. Now I'm gonna listen to the playback.